Hi guys, welcome to my channel and the third week of Inktober 2019. In this video, rather than talk about the ink painting techniques I used, which I did last week, today I'm going to talk more about the prompts themselves and share with you how I came up with the ideas of what to paint instead of going over how I painted them again. So I hope you enjoy the video. If you want to catch up on my other Inktober videos, I'll put links at the end of this one, and all the materials I use will be listed in the description box. So let's jump straight in with day 12, and the prompt was dragon. So within my animals and nature theme, I had a lot of ideas for this prompt, and to start with I did want to try painting a dragon, as that's something I've never done before, but I did a few thumbnail sketches and struggled to get something I was happy with. So then I thought of a dragon fruit, which is pretty interesting and unusual, or even a snapdragon flower. But I ended up deciding on this dragonfly, and I thought I'd practice a bit more with my dip pen to mark in the fine detail on the wings. So rather than paint the whole dragonfly, I decided to focus in on a small section and marked in the outlines first with neat ink before doing the background or the flower at the top. Once this was dry, I could then work on the rest of the painting. The wings were a bit fiddly, but it was good for practicing my line art skills. I'd mentioned last week that I was struggling a bit with using the dip pen on the rougher surface of this cold pressed paper, as I found the nib of the pen kept catching and almost dug into the grooves in the paper at times. And that did happen again a bit today, so to get around it, I tried to use a really light hand when inking in the lines and not press down too hard on the dip pen, and I think this definitely helped. In contrast to the detail, I really enjoyed painting in the looser background with my water brush and used several layers of ink on the flower to build depth. I went back in with more detail on the wings once it was all dry, which took quite a while, but I'm glad I did, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. For day 13, the prompt was ash, and the only thing I could think of was an ash tree. I didn't know what an ash tree looked like though, so I did a bit of googling and learnt that the leaves of an ash tree occur in opposite pairs, except for the leaf at the end, and the branches on either side of the tree are directly opposite each other rather than being staggered. I don't know that I depicted these characteristics very accurately in my painting, but it was a good thing to learn something new anyway. I was really interested with this prompt to see what other ideas people had come up with, and quite a few people had drawn volcanoes, which I thought was a really clever interpretation of the prompt, and one I wished I'd thought of. I've even got some reference pictures of my own of a real-life active volcano from our holiday to Lanzarote this year. We actually had the opportunity to go on a trip to the top of the active volcano and had dinner cooked from the heat of the volcanic rock, which was pretty amazing. But I didn't think of this in time, so an ash tree it was. I did have fun playing around with the lifting and layering ink though with this one, and whilst not my favourite painting this week, I think it's okay. For day 14, the prompt was overgrown, and my initial thoughts for this one were of an overgrown garden or forest. But then I thought, what about overgrown hair or fur? And that's when I came up with the idea to paint this Highland cow with its long shaggy hair over its eyes. I've not painted one of these before, so I was really looking forward to it, and decided to focus my attentions on painting a close-up of the face rather than the whole body. Again, I started by painting in the darkest areas first, so the eyes and nose, before tackling all that hair afterwards once the paper had dried. I think working in just one colour for my Inktober pieces has really been helping me to focus on improving and getting my values right. But this painting is one I'd like to try and do again, perhaps in colour with my watercolour paints, sometime in the future maybe. It did take a bit longer to paint all the hair as I worked in layers for this bit, painting from light to dark, and as with any hair or fur, I had to keep in mind the length and direction of fur to help make it look realistic. I really enjoyed the process though, and think this might be my favourite painting this week. But as always, let me know in the comments below which of this week's painting you like the best, as I love to get your thoughts and feedback. One thing that was mentioned in last week's video is the music I used, which might have been a bit loud or distracting. So this week, as you've probably noticed, I'm trying out just having the music in the gaps where I'm not talking. So let me know your thoughts on this one too. Okay, so day 15's prompt was legend, and oh my goodness, I had no idea what to do for this, and even had to look up the definition of the word before I could begin. So a legend is defined as a traditional story regarded as historical but not authenticated. It can also refer to an extremely famous or notorious person. With my animals and nature theme, I started to think of different animal legends, so maybe the Loch Ness Monster or a Yeti. In the end though, I stumbled on the legend of Bigfoot and decided to go with that. The problem I then had was to come up with an image, or rather compile an image based on other people's stories or ideas, as there are no proven sightings of its existence. And this is the sort of thing I find quite hard, because as much as I have quite an imagination, I tend to stick to the safety of painting something from a reference photo. But getting out of my comfort zone is something I challenged myself to do this Inktober. So I came up with the idea of having Bigfoot's face a bit like an ape and having him hiding behind some leaves and branches. As much as this one was a bit daunting, I found it quite liberating. There was no real reference picture to work from, but that meant that I could do what I wanted and be free to experiment more with design and get a bit more creative for a change. It also meant that there was no right or wrong, which took any pressure out of the situation, and I actually ended up enjoying this piece far more than I thought I would. The one thing I do regret a bit is going in with too many harsh lines in the beginning, but on the whole it's okay. So day 16 and we're over halfway. The prompt for this day was wild, and I had so many ideas for this painting that I didn't know which to choose. I thought of wild animals, wild flowers, wild strawberries and so on, but in the end came up with a wild bird on a branch laden with wild berries. It's not as dramatic or adventurous as it could have been, but with the small size of my paper this year, I thought I'd at least get to fit in a whole bird, and it's what took my fancy on the day. I did try and be a bit more adventurous with my composition than I'm used to though, and despite using a reference photo for the bird's proportions and markings, I kind of changed and redesigned the background and added in my own leaf design to make it look a bit more interesting. I also positioned the bird to one side of the paper rather than centre him perfectly, and drew him on a bit of an angle as well, just to play around a bit and see what I like and what I don't like. In the end, I don't love this piece as a result and think I went far too dark with a few of the leaves, but I tried to balance it out by keeping the berries very light, and I like the way the bird turned out, although I'm not sure drawing him at this angle worked. The prompt for day 17 was ornament, so with this one I thought about animal ornaments first, as I remember my nan used to have a lot of really lovely birds and wildlife ornaments. I don't know what happened to those though, and I don't have anything myself that I could use as a reference for this prompt, but I do have some ornamental plants, so basically not real ones. As much as I love having plants around the house, I am terrible at remembering to water them. So I do have a few artificial plants which just require the occasional dusting. For this prompt I thought I'd paint a clear glass bowl with some little ornate stones and shells in the bottom, with some artificial plants coming out over the top. And it was really fun. Again, I chose not to have the bowl central on my page as I thought that might be a bit boring. So I ended up drawing it to one side and painted some beams of light on the right hand side of the page instead. The bit at the top of the glass bowl that I go back in and detail with my dip pen is meant to be a bit of reflection, by the way. I feel like as the month is going on, I am gradually loosening up a bit and gaining a bit more confidence to try different compositions and add in my own features or experiment more without being overly concerned if it doesn't turn out as well as I'd hoped. Inktober is really great for that, as like I've said before, you haven't really got time to dwell on one painting before moving on to the next one. At the end I added in some of my sepia pit pen just to emphasise the curly shaped leaf, and I was quite pleased with the end result. So on to the last day of this week and day 18, and the prompt for today is MISFIT. This prompt had me well and truly stumped. I drew a complete blank for this one. But luckily my sister came to the rescue with the clever idea of painting the ugly duckling from the children's story. The ugly duckling was different to the other ducks and didn't fit in, so it was the perfect misfit for my ink painting today. And I thought whilst I'm painting this one, I'd tell you a bit of the behind the scenes story for the prompt list itself and what I did before Inktober began. So the official Inktober prompt list from Jake Parker usually comes out at the beginning of September each year, I guess to give people a bit of thinking time. Once I've seen it, I usually have a brainstorming session with a theme in mind, and my super sister does the same. Then when we've done, we compare lists and choose the best ideas from each, and it works really well. My sister will come up with ideas I hadn't thought of and vice versa, and we carry on thinking it over until we've filled in all the blanks. This year there were, and actually still are, a few blanks, as I feel like the list has been a bit more challenging this year. But coming up with ideas is all part of the fun, and like I said earlier as well, it's always nice to follow others taking part in the challenge too, to see how they interpret the prompt list. That said, I don't like to see what everyone else has drawn or painted each day before I've done my painting, as I don't want it to influence how or what I do for the day, so I always save looking on Instagram and watching YouTube videos till later. I'd love to know how you come up with your ideas if you're taking part in Inktober this year and working from a prompt list. So do you think about your ideas beforehand, or do you leave it to the actual day? Let me know below. For my duckling painting, I kept it quite simple and soft, but hopefully got enough light and dark in the painting so it didn't look too flat. For some reason, I decided to add in some eggs in the foreground partway through the inking process, which is something I pretty much never do. Normally I draw it all out first and stick with it, but I think it gives this piece a storyline which I kind of like. I kept the harsh lines to a minimum today to try and get the feel of soft fluffy feathers across, and used my water brush over the dip pen and the wet in wet technique to help with that, even painting in the few bulrushes I'd added with the water brush as well. To build up the depth a bit, I just kept adding more layers, and although there isn't a super load of feather detail on the duck's chest, there is the suggestion there which you might not be able to see very well on camera, but is there all the same. So I really like how this one turned out. And that's another week done, guys. Before I go though, I'll just show you a quick flip through of another 7 original paintings that I'm putting up in my Etsy shop today. So go and check the description box if you're interested in those. And next week I may upload the Inktober video on Thursday instead of Friday, as I have another video I'd like to try and get up for Friday. So make sure if you like this video to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you fancy, and hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching, have a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, bye.